Yes, hello, good morning again. Today's date is August 31st, 2024. This is Daniel Fitzgerald posting one more video today on the Sabbath. I want to express to people who are watching my videos, you're not my friends. The people watching my videos are not friends with me. Canada has suppressed all my videos to organized criminals and Nazis in security here, right across the judicial board. They're corrupted, dirty judges and they're politicians. Those are the only people that see my videos. The general public does not. But this video here, and I'm going to address this issue here on YouTube so that when all my videos finally go public, people will be able to see them all. It's a really catch title. I wanted to explain what is coming to the world at large, to Canada, the United States, other countries, the truth, which I researched, and the truth is very solid, very true, and there's no lie here. None. All these governments around the globe are, facing a global catastrophe. Not just one, but a number of them. They all know that. Your leaders know that. Your parliaments know that. Your security chieftains know that. Your generals of your military know that. Which has resulted in all of these governments, not all of them, but a number of them anyway. I'm not sure the exact figure, but shall we say most NATO state leaders, their families, their opposition parties, their families, some security chieftains, some royal people who are kings and queens and princes and this kind of thing. These governments have, what they've done is they have cut deals with extraterrestrial aliens, is what they've done. And they've cut secretive deals with them, so that when what I'm about to explain to you happens, or just before, they're not going to be on Earth, all these governments, or so they think. So I want to explain this to you in detail, what I know. And it's not going to be a very long video, because it's not really going to take too long to expose what I'm going to expose. President Vladimir Putin of Russia, very much like other countries, has a space program. The Russians have telescopes up there orbiting, and their own telescopes like IRIS and other telescopes that Western countries have orbiting around the Earth that can see far out into the galaxy. The Russians indeed have that capability as well. They can see the same things out in the solar system that we can see through their own telescopes, which are more advanced than ours, actually. And one of the things that popped up for the president of Russia, Vladimir Putin, was this Nibiru rumor coming out of the West, and also out of some very truthful people in South America, about this constellation called Nibiru. Okay. Well, first of all, let's put a few things in order here. There was a guy in the United States who's well known. What the heck is his name? See, I forgot. I haven't really looked him up. What's his website called? Let me think for a minute here. He started in around 2009. Your Own World USA. That's it. And he started researching the Nibiru constellation. He was talking about Blue Bonnet. He had cameras at the tops of mountains pointed at the sun in South America, this guy. And because he was looking for the Nibiru system to start coming in. And one of the signs of that would be a planet that rotates the Nibiru star called Blue Bonnet. What was his name? What's his name, Jen?
Marshall Masters?
Marshall Masters, yeah, that's his name. So he started this, actually. In 2009-10, he put a video on YouTube about explaining to people what's going to happen when this thing comes. And there were 4 different scenarios of its path. One of the scenarios involved little or light damage to planet Earth, while the other 3 scenarios were somewhat more brutal, and the final one being absolutely brutal. And Marshall Masters started posting these videos on YouTube, and I caught on to them, my wife and I couldn't believe what he was saying. I mean, it was really rather shocking. And I believe that, Marshall Masters thinks he's very accurate. The problem with Marshall Masters' evidence that he had is he was partially right, but also partially wrong, because Marshall Masters stated that we would get hit first with the debris field of the Nibiru constellation before it even came around the sun. Now, the problem with that theory of his back then, something that he's kind of maintained still all along, is that since at least 2010, the White House under the Obama administration has known about planetoids, rogue planets, and debris fields going into our sun as we orbit it, coming past us, flying in front of us, coming up from below, coming down from above on the north and southern poles, and the west and east equator lines from every direction they're coming through, pulled in by the sun's gravitational field. So this kind of put Marshall Masters' theory about the debris field out the window, because we've been having debris fly past us hitting the sun, which has caused big solar flares. Our sun is much like it's really a planet of liquid fire on the surface, and really does not have a surface gravity to speak of. So when they talk about a coronal mass ejection from the sun, or sunspots that they show on YouTube, what they're saying is that essentially is rogue planets are coming in, smashing into the sun's surface, and the sun's surface is liquid fire. Okay, it's liquid, burning all the time, and because it has no surface gravity, when a planet hits that ocean of liquid fire, which you could say use water or gasoline or oil as an example, but it is liquid. So when a planet smashes into it, it cuts a hole through the sun's coronal, and it hits the surface of the planet. And when it hits the liquid, it's like an asteroid hitting the Pacific Ocean, right? If an asteroid were to hit our Pacific or Atlantic Oceans, a big one, it will cause a splash, right? And the splash goes back up into the sky, right? But the problem with that simply is we have gravity, so whatever water goes up comes down, right? But the surface of the sun has no gravity, and you can't stand on it because you just float off into outer space like you would on the moon. So when a planet hits it, it forms a splash. It goes off into outer space, but it's fire, okay, and vaporizing liquid, and that's what causes solar flares. They don't tell you that. See, my friend at his name is James, World News Report Today, he does this. There's another guy who does this, monitors solar flaring by the sun. They have satellites posted off the sun, between us and the sun, monitoring the sun's output, but they don't tell you any of that. See, they're not telling you that it's planets hitting the sun, hitting the liquid surface, and it splashes back out into outer space with fire and vaporized liquid. Right? That's what they're scared of. Now, it's been going on for a long time. It's increased over the decade. The reason why is because Marshall Masters was wrong, because our planet and other planets that rotate our star, planets in our solar system, Venus and Mars and Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Pluto, and so on, that rotate our star. We're moving with our star. through outer space, right? Even when we spin around it, our sun is drifting through outer space, carrying all us planets with it. So now the sun and our planets have moved into a part of outer space which is very dangerous for any kind of life. NASA knows this. NASA's telescopes have taken pictures of parts of the galaxy that are millions of light years away from us, that they recognize the planet Earth with life on it could never survive moving through these galaxies with our star, because there's too many collisions of planets and too much debris fields. So they realize that, right? So we're moving into that right now. But you know that the reason why it's taking so long is because our sun and Earth and all the other planets that rotate around our star, we're moving very, very slowly with our sun through the galaxy. It's a very, very slow. At what speed do we move with our sun through the galaxy? I don't know. But I can tell you the pace is a lot slower than our rotation around the sun. Therefore, that's why this problem, this danger is slowly creeping up on Earth and the other planets, Mars and so on. Everything protecting us is gone. He's actually protected the Earth because Mike Around the World was right about that on Begley's show. Then it's got to be gone. He said it used to be there was 1,000,000 to 1 chance of us getting hit by a major asteroid to wipe out the planet. Now it's 1 chance in 1,000,000 that we won't be hit by an asteroid. And the fact that we haven't been, and those are the odds, by the way, means that something's protecting us. And that can only be God. Only God can do that. And Jupiter's receiving impacts all the time. They're not telling you. Mars is receiving impacts almost every day. Jupiter is, Venus is, Saturn is, but they're not telling you. The only planet in our solar system not receiving hundreds of impacts per year is us. Even the moon's got impacted. And the moon is still being impacted. They're just not telling you. You might see it in the media once every 2 years that something hit the moon. But really it's happening several times a year. But they're not showing you. Well, back to what I was saying. When President Vladimir Putin of the Russian Federation became president, he had meetings with scientists and they told him about this Nibiru thing. So because of that, he had ordered several of his top scientists in the country to research this this danger and to come back to him with an answer. The first team he recruited came back to him with no answers. Or maybe they didn't want to tell him. I'd say that's more likely what it was. So he fired them or dismissed them. I don't think he fired them, he just dismissed them from the project. And he hired another group. And he told them he wants answers. He said, I want answers about this. So this group of scientists spent a year or two. The second group, they researched it heavily. And then they sent their report to President Putin. Now, their report at that time, and this goes back to 2020, 21, 22. Or 2020-21, I should say, as well. The report that went back to President Putin from the scientific team was that they found it, and it was about 275 or 80 million miles from Earth, and it was coming this way. And so they measured its speed, which was, I think, 12,600 kilometers an hour, or 12,600 miles an hour. I'm not sure which. I'm a little confused on that one. One or the other. And then based on that calculation, that the constellation will arrive here somewhere between November 2021 and February 6, 2022. Not the constellation. It was not the constellation they were stipulating would arrive here. It's the debris fields that would kill us. You see, they had projected that we would all die on Earth a year before, approximately a year before the constellation actually arrives itself, like the planets. Okay, so no one on Earth would see them because we'd all be dead, quite frankly. But they told President Putin that that trajectory was based upon the premise that the constellation wouldn't stop moving. See, because this constellation has a tendency to stop and reverse its rotation. It could stop for 6 months, it could stop for a year, and just sit in outer space. Then suddenly, it'll reverse rotation. Its star will reverse rotation along with its planets, either counterclockwise or clockwise, and start coming toward us. So they told him, as long as they said that it was moving towards us at the time that they had researched it, and that it continued moving toward us. So I can only assume that it must have stopped. That's what happened. That's why it's not here yet. Now, when this started coming out and going public to some degree, this was during the time that Barack Obama was president of the United States, and then I found out that through reliable sources that Barack Obama had made a counter proposal date on this issue based on scientific reports from American scientists to the White House, and that the Russian calculation was wrong. He said that. Obama said that this will happen in 2025. That was the American scientific calculation. I think theirs was based loosely on, I think they monitored for a while the time frames of when this constellation stopped and started, and I think his scientists had tried to make some kind of calculation based on it starting and stopping, and how long it stopped for and started, and they gave a rough calculation based on that. That was the reason for, that's what I believe was the reason why he dated it 2025. But even then, they could be off on that one. It could come sooner, it could come later. But it turns out, because the Russian calculation, although it was right, but it was based on the constellation not stopping and continuing to come toward us. Because of that, they were correct. Okay, because it stopped was the only reason why the Russian scientific calculations of President Vladimir Putin were incorrect. That's the only reason why, and they had already told him that it could stop. Well, the difference is that Barack Obama's scientists of the United States calculated the arrival date based on it stopping and starting, which is roughly very accurate. So he said 2025. So 2025 is the year for people to take notice, and we are going to have much increased planetoids, asteroids, and moon-sized objects, and lesser and greater than that coming at the end of this year. And 2025 is going to be a very bad year for planet Earth regarding asteroids and debris fields, and so on. It's going to be very bad. And there's several other things that are going to happen on the surface outside of that particular event in 2025. That's the reason why I'm posting this video, to clarify with you people. Now, the Russian article was leaked to a website titled Someone Else's Bones on Google. And that's where I read the articles that was leaked by the Russians. Okay. But I say again that the Obama administration's calculation has turned out to be the accurate one. But I believe it. The only reason why is because his scientists basically added up all the times that the constellation stopped, and then it restarted, and calculated those time periods and how long it had stopped for, and then how long it had, and then it restarted, and how long it stayed restarted, moving toward us, and then stopped. So I think they gave some kind of mathematical rough calculation based on stopping and starting and how long it stopped and started between stops and starts, and calculated 2025. But 2025 is not the year that the planets come by us. That's the year of the debris fields. And it's not the Nibiru constellation, actually. That's not what's coming. It's a star like our own, like our sun. It's the same, a sister star, if you will, a sun with planets rotating around us, and it's going to come right here. I'm not 100% positive on the debris field, because usually, like, constellations come with moons and stuff like that. If it has a star that rotates and these planets are rotating around that star, then these planets will have moons probably. I don't really see a debris field. The debris field that we're seeing now, we're going into it, okay? But this constellation coming toward us as we move into this, the debris field that we're going into has nothing to do with this constellation of planets. Nothing to do with it. Nothing. We're moving into a part of the galaxy where there's a lot of, where space is filled up to the brim with objecta, where the Earth cannot possibly go through it all without getting hit. That's what we're going into. So space is becoming more and more condensed with objects. That's that we're moving into. And as we move in further and further, the space that the Earth requires to go around our star is going to get filled and more filled with objects in our way. Okay, that's the problem. Now that's completely separate from this constellation. This constellation, as it comes toward us, is also going to be facing this increased debris field. As it approaches us, it's going to get hit too. So if there's life on those planets in that star, they're going to get hit as well. It's not just us. Okay, so that's what I'm telling you. So really, the debris field we're moving into has nothing to do with Planet X and its constellation, if you want to call it that. Nothing to do with it, because if Planet X and its constellation, as they refer to it, is going to go through the same bombardment as we are, and our planets as well. It's not possible that the constellation or its star can be thrown out of our orbit due to the increased impactors. But they're not big enough. You need big planets the size of the star to move the star out of the way and distribute its planets into rogue planets that can no longer rotate. Mike Around the World mentioned that we could very well go out of our orbit. He said he's worried that Mars might hit it, or not Mars, but he said that he was worried that Mercury might hit us. I think he said Mercury, or maybe it was Mars. I'm not sure. I can't remember. He's very worried about that. Understandably, what they're not telling you is that Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars have already left their orbits. Okay? They leave their orbits and they either get closer to the sun or go further away from the sun. They have already left their orbits. This is one of the reasons why at times Jupiter can be seen with the naked eye from the ground here, and so can Mars, because what's happened is they went out of orbit and moved closer to the sun, and so it was already reported that Mars a few years back went out of its orbit, got closer to the sun, right, and then went back out and reformed its orbit around the sun. So there was a dead spot in the gravitational pull of the sun on Mars. There was a dead spot there which caused Mars to go out of orbit, but it went towards the sun. It didn't go away from it. The same with Jupiter and the same with Saturn. Probably Uranus as well. Probably. Okay, but they're not telling you that. So these planets are going in and out of orbit. And the reason why is because the gravitational field of our sun that keeps them in line, in their line of rotation, at times when the sun gets bombarded really badly, and it turns toward us, right? And I believe that these sunspots on the surface of the sun, if there's a lot of them on a portion of the sun, and as it rotates toward us and other planets in the galaxy that are further away from us, like Jupiter and Uranus and Saturn and Mars, because their rotational poles are much weaker. If the sun loses a part of its gravitational pull on the outer planets, because the gravitational field holding them in position is weaker than our own, they drift out of their orbit. That's what's happened, I believe. And the only way that can happen logically is if some big planets have hit the sun, causing certain parts of its face to have no gravitational pull. We don't move out of orbit because the gravitational rotational pull on us is much greater than Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and so on. Okay, it's far greater. Okay, so, but if the sun is losing its gravitational pull of Earth, then eventually, yeah, we'll go out of orbit. Mercury could be kicked out of orbit and hit us. Our own moon could hit us. So, there's a lot of issues, and they're not telling you. The governments won't tell their people. I believe that, that possibly, and I'm not sure, it's a theory really, is that this is the reason for the British government coming down hard on the British people, because they're scared. They're scared because they know what's coming in 2025. So they're putting the hammer down on their citizens. In other words, they're trying to control the pandemic, the panic of people. They're trying to control them before they go into a panic. Because believe me when I tell you that people on Earth are going to see some things going on up there closer to the end of this year, and in 2025, there's going to scare the living daylights out of you. We're going to have planets coming through our atmosphere. You're going to see them flying by. Some you'll see, some you won't see. You'll feel their effect, but these planets could come through our atmosphere, cutting a big hole in it as they pass through at 30 miles a second, which means that by the time you blink, they'll be gone. So you may not see them, but you'll feel the effects, and that's what they're worried about. So I'm just telling the public this. I've never done a video like this before, but I'm finally decided to do one. So your planet is in grave danger. The reasons why there's a lack of food, the reasons why food is so expensive now, is because they're stockpiling it for their armies, okay? In Europe and in the Middle East. It costs a lot of money and a lot of food to build up these huge militaries and increase, their troops tenfold. It costs a lot of money, and it takes food away from the people. Okay, that's one thing. And then you have, on top of that, these governments, believe me, they're stocking up as much food as they can for this event, these events that are coming, because they think they're going to survive. They're not going to survive on the planet. And none of these governments and their leaders and their families are going to survive on the surface of the planet. They could go underground right in the beginning, but that's not going to help because they're facing lava down below and massive quakes. They've all built up huge underground shelters in hardened rock, which are just not going, that's not going to work. It's just, temporarily it might, but they'll all end up getting buried in it. Okay, because we have lava oceans underneath the crust of the Earth between the mantle and the surface crust. So parts of the surface crust are floating on liquid lava, okay? Liquid lakes of lava or oceans of lava underneath our surface, underneath the crust surface at the mantle. So we're floating to some degree, which makes it very easy for crustal displacement in certain places around the globe. Then on top of all that, our planets are tilting in some direction, being forced to tilt by some kind of universal gravitational pull, which is causing our planet's magnetic true north to drift to Siberia and Russia. And the problem with that is that at some point, between the time our magnetic north pole is crossing the Atlantic Ocean headed for Siberia, at some point the planet has to respond physically to the magnetic north movement, okay? Which means that the planet is eventually going to suddenly tilt to the new angle in opposition to the magnetic true north where it's located now. Like right now, it's nearing Siberia in Russia, across the Atlantic, and the planet has still maintained true north. Okay, our equator lines are still in line with the old North Pole, but the magnetic North Pole is going towards Russia. So eventually, we're going to have a pole shift, which is going to change the equator line of the planet permanently. So they're facing that too. Okay, we have actually two North Poles now. We have the artificial one here above Canada, which is being artificially sprayed with ice nuclei, and then we have the real one, which is now over Europe. This is the reason why Europe has such bad snowstorms now. This is why they're getting 20 feet of snow all over Europe in the wintertime. They're getting horrible snowstorms because the North Pole has shifted to the northern part of Europe, headed for Siberia. So that's what I'm telling you. That's why they have such bad snowstorms. And it's getting milder and milder here. The Trudeau government's been fighting that with, and the United States government has been fighting that with huge aerosol spraying programs come September, October, November in Canada. Trudeau and his military in the U.S. go on a spraying frenzy, spraying ice nuclei, creating cold clouds and winter clouds, and creating ice nuclei snow, which is being dropped on Ottawa, okay? Dropping temperatures down to 20 below zero. But each year, they're having a much harder and harder time maintaining that. As you know, for the last 2 or so years, people cannot go ice skating in the Rideau Canal because the water just can't get cold enough. They can't do it. So I'm just going to post this video now. So this is what our planet faces. Terrible things are coming, okay? And the governments know it, so they're becoming more and more shaky, which may explain some of the reasons for these fascist Nazi restrictions on freedoms. Okay, that could very well be it. As far as the chance of nuclear war between the West and China and Russia, well, although that is a reality, I guess, the problem with that is that the three main superpowers, China, Russia, and the United States, and France and the UK, have all agreed to point their biggest nuclear weapons towards outer space. They will all attack an incoming asteroid, say something that's 100 meters or more. They will all attack such an asteroid with every nuclear weapon they have. If it's coming to hit the planet, they will attack it with nuclear weapons. So they've all got that agreement. All of these nations with nuclear weapons. And what I'm talking about here is intercontinental ballistic missiles with MIRVs, nuclear MIRVs in their warheads that go up into the atmosphere. Okay, they go up into the atmosphere. But they're going to they've retargeted many of these vehicles now, pointed into outer space for incoming asteroids. That's what they've done. So there is some question as to the actual legitimacy of a nuclear war between Russia and China and the West, since they have that agreement, that secret agreement. So many of their bigger nuclear weapon systems that are intercontinental ballistic missiles, including submarines. Like submarines are on standby as well by China, Russia, the United States, the British, and France, where they would all join together, including their ballistic missile submarines, if there's an incoming asteroid, which would have to be at least 100 meters in diameter, I would think. And if they determine that it's going to hit NATO cities or any city or country, they will fire nuclear weapons at it together to try and break it up into smaller pieces. It'll still impact the planet, but if they can make the pieces much smaller, then there'll be less of an effect on the entire Earth. But if they break them up, large portions of these broken up asteroids will come through the atmosphere anyway, and we're going to get debris coming through, hitting different parts of the globe, causing massive damage. The question is it better to shoot one and break it up and have the whole planet get sprayed with the risk of smaller objects from the big one hitting cities, which can do terrible damage? Or is it better off to let them come in as a single unit and just hit one spot? That's probably been debated by these countries and their national security leaders, but I do know that they all have an agreement together. It is true, they do have an agreement where they all agree that they will attack a potentially hazardous asteroid that's large enough to shut down the governments around the globe for a few months anyway. If we get hit even by one that's a couple of 100 meters in diameter all the way around, it's going to shut down the planet for at least a couple of months. All their communication systems are going to go down. I'm just simply telling it like it is. So we have to look at that with reality. They mitigate it, like Trudeau admitted. They're fighting climate change. Well, they're not fighting climate change. They're mitigating it for as long as they can, and they've been doing that a long time. But they're not going to stop what's coming. It's just not going to happen. Once it gets to be too much, there's going to be curfews. You won't be allowed to go out certain times of the day. They will restrict your right to travel from state to state, or in our case, province to province. They'll start restricting you from going anywhere. Okay, they're going to start doing that at some point. And really, realistically, no place on Earth is really safe from this happening. There just isn't any place on Earth that's safe. So, I think people have a right to know. Sometime this will go public. And also, I wish to state to you that it all follows very closely with religious tribulation. So, I'm telling you all this. It's religious tribulation, that's what it is. And it's all linked with the Bible, they know it. They know it's all linked with the Bible, they all know it. And you people now know. And they know that, because they're evil, that's why. The reason they've committed evils against God. They've just committed evil after evil, and so I'm letting it out. It's all linked to the Bible. I've studied all of it. Book of Revelation, Daniel 11:12. The ones you have to pay attention to are Daniel 11 and 12 in the Torah, and you have to pay attention to Luke 21. And the book of Revelation. They're all tied in together. So that's what's coming. If you read all of it, you'll understand what's going on. The governments are lying. Trudeau's lying. They're all lying. They're censoring everybody. They're censoring me, censoring you. That's what they're doing. And the UK, think about it. Does it make sense to any of you that the United Kingdom, that King Charles would put up with what's going on in the UK? It's a violation of their constitutional rights, right? So think about it. Why is he doing it? Why is Charles letting Der Stürmer get away with it? Right? Think about it. And you'll come up with the same conclusions I have. There's a reason. The UK is getting ready. They need to control all their people. They know that when these things start happening, that, as soon as people see this happening, and as soon as impacts start hitting the ground, okay, they're going to go crazy. And they know that. So that's why, see, these governments, part of what they're doing, this new Nazi idealism, is right now they're scared. They've lied to the public about what's coming. Okay? They've lied to their people. They're not telling them the truth. And they know that the truth is coming, whether they tell it or not. And they know that when their people find out what they've been withholding, people are going to really go crazy, and they're going to want to kill their governments.
That's the bottom line. The governments are all in danger because they're not telling you the truth. They're not telling the people the truth about what's going on, what's going to happen. And as, I'm eating. As we get closer and closer to impacts, some of these governments are going to lose their minds, and they're going to commit to freedom restriction policies because they're getting scared. And I'm going to tell you all right now, Der Sturmer of the UK is frightened out of his mind. That's why they're pulling what they're pulling there. There's just, because what's going to happen here, the UK, the United Kingdom, remember folks, is an island. It's a giant island, including Scotland and Ireland and so on, and Wales. Okay? And the southern tip of their island and the northern tip of their island, which is Scotland, is sitting confronting the Atlantic Ocean. Okay? The only division is the English Channel, which is 40 miles wide. But other than that, the UK is facing the ocean. It's facing the southern part of the UK is facing the Atlantic right down to Antarctica. Okay? There's a wide berth there they know, the Prime Minister of England knows that the Atlantic's going to get hit with some big asteroids, and these are going to cause massive tidal waves. Okay? And the tidal waves could be 300 feet, 400 feet, 1,000 feet high, moving at 400, 500, 600 miles an hour. And if that happens, it's going to come right up to Thames River and hit London and go as far north as Scotland. Okay? They know that. The UK doesn't have any mountains. Scotland has mountains, right? So people in the UK would be far safer in Scotland than they are in London or other parts of the UK because it's essentially flat. It is the southern portion of the UK that's non-mountainous, that's really, a few feet above sea level. London's included, that's one of these cities. As you go north from the southernmost point of the UK, as you go north, it gets higher and higher, right? That's why you have, essentially small mountains all over Scotland, because in the southern tip of the UK, when you move due north up the UK, it gets higher and higher above sea level, you see. You understand? So that's what I'm telling you. So they're very scared because they know what's coming. Der Sturmer knows. They know that the 2025, maybe this year, by the end of this year, we could receive a huge impact in the Pacific Basin. Like a 100-meter asteroid could hit the Pacific Basin right in the middle. And any, for example, I'll give you another little bullshit story about the Secretary General of the UN, Guterres. And he came out last week, I think it was, and stated that was very concerned because the oceans are rising. Now, understand that when these political leaders talk in public, they use coded language. So in other words, what this means, I'll explain this to you. What it means is when the Secretary General says, well, oceans are rising very fast, that could be a coded message indicating that soon large objects are going to hit the Atlantic Basin and cause tidal waves. That could be that's what I believe he was trying to say. What Guterres was trying to say is that, listen, nation, soon we're going to get the Atlantic Ocean is going to get hit with asteroids very soon now, and we can't stop them, and they're going to cause tidal waves. That's what I believe Secretary Guterres was stating, because quite frankly, trying to state that the oceans are rising because of the melt-off in Antarctica, the ice melting in Antarctica is a pile of bullshit. The oceans have hardly risen at all, okay? And most of the northern Arctic in Canada is gone anyway, for the most part. So, that's what I'm telling you. It's mostly gone already. They're just able to make it icy because they're spraying ice nuclei up there, which is causing polar bears' fur to tear off because polar bears sleep on the ice. And so the ice, when they use ice nuclei to freeze the northern Arctic here and create ice, the problem is the surface of the ocean, when they spray ice nuclei to create ice over northern Arctic here and above Canada, when they do that, the problem is that the ice nuclei is probably about 150 to 200 below zero when it hits the surface of the Arctic Ocean, which causes ice to form very quickly and get thick very quickly. And the problem with that is when it gets thick enough, it's so cold that polar bears lie on the ice. Okay? And normally the ice up there is only at between 20 and 40 below zero. But when it's 150 below zero on the surface of the ice, because they're consistently spraying it, polar bears sleep on the ice. And when the ice that they're sleeping on is 150 below zero, their fur sticks to it like glue. So when they get up, their fur ends up being ripped off their arms and legs and their stomach because they can't get up. They got to rip their fur off to do it. Okay, that's why over the years we've seen photographs on YouTube of polar bears in our northern Arctic with patched losses of fur on their paws. That's why, because they're sticking to the ice nuclei they've created because the ice is so cold. So, anyway. So yeah, the UK's, that's the reason why the UK's come down hard on its people, although it is the Reichstag fire decree and fire decree laws. It's because Der Stürmer came into power, and as Prime Minister of the UK, who's entitled to top secret global danger, okay, that's projected. And the Tories started doing that as well, okay. And the only possible conclusion one can draw logically is that they did it because they know soon we're going to start getting impacts, as per Barack Obama's prediction that it would be 2025 when this constellation would swing our way and we would be affected by it, dangerously so. You understand? So it all comes together like glue. Obviously, they can see it up there. They can see the constellation. Obviously, they can see the debris field. They know the speed in which we're going into it with our star and our planets. And they know when there's not going to be a lot of room for Earth to bypass these objecta floating around, and we're moving at 30 miles per second, so around the sun. So they see it coming, okay? So they're all getting really scared. Because if one hits the Atlantic Ocean, that's 100 meters or a couple of 100 meters or more in diameter, we're going to feel it here real bad in Canada, the United States. And people are going to go into a pandemic. It's going to be a panic. People are going to go crazy, and they're going to be out to hang and kill their governments for lying and their leaders, you see. That's the problem. The governments are getting scared now. So they have to be able to control the people. Okay, they have to be able to do that. And as they get scareder and scareder, so will they increase and take away people's freedoms. The United States, Canada, and other countries soon, they will adopt policies where you're not allowed to leave the state or province or city that you live in, that you're quarantined in that city and you cannot leave. And monkeypox and the mosquito virus in the United States are some good reasons and excuses for them to do just that. But it's not because of that. It is because of what's coming. We know that the U.S. has most of its forces in the Middle East. We know that the U.S. has a lot of its forces in Europe, right, on the ground. We know that a large majority of American naval forces, believe it or not, if you look at the geographical locations of U.S. aircraft carriers and navies, if you can look at it from another angle, when they sit in the Mediterranean or the Red Sea, the Strait of Hormuz, okay, they're out of the ocean, right? And it's the same thing in Europe with these American aircraft carriers in the Black Sea, okay, or sitting in ports in NATO states, okay. They're protected from the oceans, right? So, you know, if something impacts the Atlantic, well, we know that a tidal wave will go up the Mediterranean for sure, but it'll be much, much smaller. Because right now, the United States navies are in danger if they start floating around the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans. The closer we get to impacts, okay, and possible huge tidal waves that could wipe out their entire naval forces if they're out in the open in the Pacific Basin or the Atlantic Basin, they're going to want to move a majority of their navies into protected waters with an excuse. Let's attack Iran. We're here to defend Israel. Or we're going to attack Russia, right? That could all very well be just an excuse for them to protect their ships from these events. Okay, because when you look at it, you know, the places where the U.S. Navy, like they've got all their carriers now, many of them in the Middle East, okay, in the Red Sea, the Mediterranean, the Gulf of Aqaba, and so on, right? Well, these, as I said, these are like ponds away from the lakes. You know, imagine having a 5-foot RC tugboat, and you're running it. You normally run it in Lake Erie, right? But on a stormy day on Lake Erie, the waves are 10 feet high, right? Or maybe not that, to me, 4 feet high or 5 feet high. That's more realistic, or 7 feet high. And you cannot run a 5-foot tugboat in Lake Erie when the waves are 5 or 6 feet tall. Okay, it'll sink it. So you move your tugboat to a small river, or you move it through a strait to a small lake that does not get hit by waves from Lake Erie, where the water stays calm, right? So you have to look at it from that perspective as well. Well, that's what I believe the U.S. government is doing. Like, they've moved a lot of their majority of troops, aircraft to Europe. Why? Is it because of the Russians? Or is it because the U.S. knows they're going to get wiped out? The Russians have moved a lot of their forces out of the Moscow area. They've moved them east in Russia. They've done a lot of that. Why? Is it because of the Americans, or is it because of something else? Well, maybe in their case it's because of the build-up against them, but the build-up against them may not necessarily be just because they want to destroy Russia. It could also be because these troops are deep inland in Europe, around Poland and the Balkans and, you know, Germany, France, and so on. And if you have a big tidal wave coming up the Atlantic, man, you don't want their ships or naval forces, surface combatants, on the ocean. You want them in protected waters. Okay? Now, if there is an event coming, one of the first things you want to look for in the media is where the United States has ordered, for example, their warships, say, into the Gulf of Carpentania between Australia and New Guinea in protected waters. That'll give them some protection from asteroids, okay? So when you start hearing them moving their ships away from Taiwan, you're going to start hearing the Americans doing that and moving closer and closer to what I just stated, shoal waters where they're protected between Pacific Island oceans, which they're really not protected. One hits the Atlantic, man, they're doomed where they are, because a lot of these islands are very low-lying. New Guinea has some mountain areas, though, and some Indonesian countries have mountainous regions where the U.S. fleet might be able to protect itself from some of it. They'll be able to protect themselves from all of it, but they'll lose some ships. But so you got to watch for that now, because I believe that's what they're going to do. They don't want their ships anywhere near the United States. Not they don't want, because unfortunately their warships can't hide behind the Adirondacks or the West Coast mountain range. Right? So There's no protected shoal waters in the United States anywhere for their ships to go where they're protected from tidal waves. I mean, think about that for a minute. There just isn't. So, and I believe that's a big part of the reason why we're seeing all this activity. I believe that's the reason why. So I wanted people to know that. I want people to know the truth. If the governments don't want to tell you the truth, all right, they don't want it. They want to lie. Now, you know, you can see it's getting critical. Right? You can see that, like I say, the actions of the UK are very suspect because they just don't make any sense. Okay? They don't. I mean, that's the bottom line. They just don't. It just doesn't correlate that it's simply Nazi. Unless if you're worried about an event that's coming and you get panicky and you decide, well, it's time to come down hard on the people and stop them from having freedom of speech, to see if we can control all of them in a panic. Well, the problem with that theory is the UK won't be able to do it when that starts happening. A lot of people in the UK are going to die because they're not going to make it out of there. They will get hit with big tidal waves. They will get rocked by massive earthquakes, which are going to crack the UK right in half. And I've already indicated that even already. I think I already touched upon it. So they all got a place to go. You know, the British, that's why Charles won't say anything, because he won't do anything, because he knows if he does, then they won't, they'll refuse him and his family some form of temporary safety in these events. You see, so he's got a deal too. That's what they're doing. They're all liars. They're going to leave the people to face the music. Well, they run and hide temporarily, and they'll get away with it. Well, we are all on the surface facing God's wrath. You see, this is what they have planned. Anyways, I'm going to stop the video now. I'm going to post it. I got to have my breakfast. And anyway, now you all know what's really happening and the truth behind what they're doing. Have a nice day. God bless. Happy Sabbath.